sign up for a lunch. It looks like a number of extra lunches have appeared, so feel free to grab one, and we'll just be back with you in a few minutes. Welcome, everyone, to this Virginia Theological Seminary Center for Anglican Communion Studies Lunchtime Forum. I'm Catherine Grebe. I'm the director of the center. I wish you a very warm welcome to everyone in the room and to those joining us virtually on Facebook, whom we can't see yet, but there are some. Good. For those of you who are new to the center's work, we exist to support the Anglican Communion by providing educational opportunities, training leaders, and providing opportunities for connecting and gathering across the communion. Last week, we premiered our new CACS promotional video, the introduction to all things CACS. But for those of you who couldn't make it, we're going to share it again today. It's less than 3 minutes. So we won't take very much of ACOA's time. But it is something that we worked over a lot to to come up with. So this would be a good time to show that. Are you curious about the worldwide Anglican Communion and the many churches in it?
Learning about the Anglican Communion is like opening a present, or as Jesus said, like finding buried treasure in a field.
Tradition and vision, diversity, and courageous witness are some of our many treasures.
We have important common goals, like witnessing to God's love for the whole world and deepening the bonds of affection that unite us.
And common challenges, like complex histories of empire and colonization, political unrest, economic inequalities, and some differences of opinion.
The Center for Anglican Communion Studies at Virginia Theological Seminary in the United States exists to support our Anglican communion neighbors near and far by providing educational resources, by training leaders, young and old, lay and ordained, male and female.
We tend to focus on the global south and other parts of the communion where our resources can have the greatest impact.
We're about connecting Anglicans throughout the world, working with Anglican commissions, networks, theological colleges, primates and provinces, bishops and dioceses, and with ecumenical partners and interfaith friends.
The work of the Centre truly lives out one aspect of the mission of Jesus Christ, serving your community and the wider church and supporting individuals to live out their calling.
One thing I've learned is a little bit more insight into the significance of deconstructing stereotypes.
It reflects the church that we are today. It has mixed nationalities, people come from different cultures and from different faiths.
One thing that I've learned in my relationship to the center is the ability to work cross-culturally. I'm able to work and relate with everyone.
The center is important because of the ecumenical way it enriches discussion. I imagine this to be a foretaste of heaven.
Reach out to us at the Center for Anglican Communion Studies.
We're here to provide support for all things Anglican Communion.
We need each other in all our commonalities and diversities to do God's work in the world.
We hope that has piqued your interest. If it has, consider becoming a companion of the Center for Anglican Communion Studies. There are brochures on the table about that, more information, and Courtney's going to post some of the information already done. She's so good. All right. Please also take a moment to look at our programming for the fall on our event card, also on the table, or our Eventbrite to see the interesting events we have coming up. And since we know that not everyone can make these sessions, we're recording today's presentation. We're recording Akwa's talk. We won't be recording the conversation that follows because we want people to feel free to say whatever they want to say. Our time today goes right up until 1:45. And now it is my great pleasure and delight to introduce someone who, if you heard her preach the other day, you don't need my introduction. I imagine some of you are here because of that wonderful, powerful sermon. Akwa Afori Boateng is the Director of Programs of the Anglican Diocese of Accra in Ghana, and the co-founder and executive director of Equitas, am I saying that right? Equitas Foundation, which supports has a vision to see a world where all young people have an opportunity to pursue their passion. And she's going to present for us today on the ordination of women, the history, the journey towards women's ordination in her diocese. Her resume is so long that if I were to read it, we wouldn't have any time to hear her talk. But more details can be found at CACS if you're interested in learning more about other things that she has published and other things that she has done. But I think at the moment, what we really want to do is get out of the way and give the floor to her. So it's a pleasure to welcome you, Akwa.
Thank you very much, Catherine, and thank you all for being here. I'd like to also say thank you to the Anglican Diocese of Accra TV, Adwa TV, who is making sure that this is being broadcast live in Accra, Ghana, right now. So again, thank you for this opportunity to share with you what will hopefully end up being the be-all and be it an end-all of my PhD thesis, which is looking at the experience journey of the first women to be ordained as priests within the Anglican Diocese of Accra. Now, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk through this journey, first looking at the big picture, the Church of the Province of West Africa, looking at the internal province of Ghana, and then we'll come down to the Accra Diocese and ultimately the 8 women that I'm looking at for my thesis. So this is West Africa. Ghana is in West Africa, and West Africa is made up of 17 countries. The land area of West Africa is about 2.4 million square miles, so that's about 62% of the area of the United States. And the population of West Africa is 425 million people, and that fits into the entire population of Africa, which is 1.4 billion people. So this is the geographical context that we are talking about. Now, the Church of the Province of West Africa is within this context. So in 1951, 5 bishops got together and said, look, we should have a province within West Africa which represents the Anglican Communion. And these countries were Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, the Gambia, and Guinea. In 1977, the Diocese of Liberia joined as well. Now, in 1979, Nigeria pulled away and formed a separate province. And this made sense because the population of Nigeria is about 400 million people, is about 200 million people. So basically, half of the population of West Africa is made up of just Nigerians. And of those who are Christian, about half of them are Anglican. So there's about 18 million Anglicans within Nigeria. So it made sense that they could stand alone as a province. In 2008, Cameroon joined the Church of the Province of West Africa. And finally, in 2012, for administrative purposes, the province was split into 2 internal provinces. And so as it stands today, the Church of the Province of West Africa is made up of the internal province of West Africa, which has Sierra Leone, Cameroon, Gambia, Guinea, and Liberia, and the internal province of Ghana. So that's a total of 6 countries and 17 dioceses, of which 6 are in the internal province of West Africa, and the remaining 11 are in the internal province of Ghana, of which the Accra Diocese is the largest of these dioceses, and that's the diocese to which I belong. To give you a sense of the Accra Diocese, our cathedral was built in 1894. It still stands today. It is still the cathedral, and it is a World Heritage Site. So I encourage you, if you ever come to Ghana, to make sure that you visit that cathedral. But when it was built under the Diocese of Equatorial Africa, obviously long before the Church of the Province of West Africa was established. In 1904, that was when we were established officially as the Church of England in Accra. Since then, we've birthed 10 additional dioceses, making a total of 11 dioceses, of which the Accra Diocese is the biggest. As a diocese, we are within the Greater Accra region. We cover about 100 square kilometers, and we have 105 worship centers. So that's 1 cathedral, 59 parishes, and 45 congregations. And that is split across 5 archdeaconries and 1 deanery. We have 132 clergymen and women, of which 120 are men and 12 are women. And so we're going to delve into how we came up with these 12 women so far. So within the Church of the Province of West Africa, although the Accra Diocese is the biggest diocese, Ghana, for the first time, if you know anything about Ghana, we're always the first to do anything. But this time we weren't. It was actually Sierra Leone that first ordained a woman. and then followed by Liberia, the Gambia, Cameroon, and finally Ghana in 2008. Now you'll see that not all the countries are represented here because not all the countries within the Church of the Province of West Africa are ordaining, or the diocese, not all of them are ordaining women yet. So even in 2008, Accra was still not the first diocese to ordain women. Sunyani Diocese ordained, then Kumasi, then finally in 2011, Accra Diocese ordained women. And within the Cape Coast Diocese, it was actually just last year that they ordained their very first woman. So what is our story? The story began with the champions of female ordination, who were His Grace the Most Reverend Honorable Dr. Justice Ofeyao Akrufi, and the Right Reverend, His Lordship, the Right Reverend Dr. Daniel Sylvanus Mensah Toto, who will be here on Sunday. So God willing, some of you will have the opportunity to meet him. Now, Akrufi was Bishop of Accra from 1996 to 2012, and he was the Archbishop for the Church of the Province of West Africa from 2003 to 2012. When he retired as bishop, His Lordship, Bishop Daniel Sylvanus Mensah Toto, took over as bishop in 2012, and he remains the bishop today. Now, when Akrufi came in 1996, he had studied in Switzerland and was a big advocate for the ordination of women. But he recognized that this wasn't something he could just impose upon the diocese. And so it was in the year 2000, that he came up with a plan for starting to introduce women to the altar, maybe not necessarily as priests, but just being physically present at the altar. And so he took to Synod a proposal to have female chalice assistants and female servers of the sanctuary, and Synod approved. 3 years later, in 2003, having given the clergy and the laity the opportunity to see women at the altar, he had identified a woman named Hilda Say, who had attended the Seabury Western Seminary here in Chicago in the USA. And she had gone through a series of interviews with the Commission of Ministry, and the Commission on Ministry had approved her as somebody who was good material to be a priest. Akrufi took this to Synod, and Synod rejected this vehemently. Synod, however, especially the House of Laity, made a recommendation to Akrufi that a committee should be put together that would review what it would take for a woman to be ordained, but they were not willing to ordain Mrs. Say. They also said to Akrufi that he should take time off to pray and think about whether it is really God's will that women should be ordained. And this is where my research comes in, where I've gone back to have discussions with people who were present at that time. At that time, there were about 50 clergy, and so there were probably about 50 or 60 laity. So the House of Laity, the House of Synod would have been about 100 to 110 people. I identified 42 people with whom to have this discussion, members of the House of Clergy, who were actively involved in training women who ultimately became priests, members of the House of Laity who were present at the time when these discussions were going on, as well as the two bishops, Akrufi and Toto, who are the people who actually ordained women. That gives us 30 men and 12 women. So it still gives you an indication of the extent to which, even within the laity, it was still very male-dominated. So using these people, I interviewed them and identified the things that were the reasons why Synod was rejecting, or Synod rejected, women being ordained as priests. And the key reasons that came up was, one, male dominance through tradition and culture. Secondly, the Bible as a basis for male dominance. Thirdly, gender discrimination. Fourth, the fear that there'd be increased financial burden on the diocese if women are allowed in, and I'll explain that. And fifth, the acceptance of female clergy by the laity. So 95% of the participants said that male dominance through culture was the primary reason why Synod rejected the idea of the ordination of women. One participant said, look, it's a male thing. Guys are the head of everything. They're the head of the family, they're the head of the church. And Bishop Akrofi said that some had even suggested to him that a woman's place is simply not at the altar. Looking at the issue of the Bible as a basis for male dominance, 93% of the study said that this was the reason why women were not ordained, or why Synod rejected the idea of ordaining women. And when I spoke with Bishop Toto, he said, you know, a lot of theories were advanced that were supposed to be theological, and that of everything that he heard, if anything sounded even vaguely theological, it was the idea that Paul had said that women should be silent in the church and should not rule over women. And this is found in Scripture. The third was the issue of gender discrimination. 79% of the study said that Synod rejected this on the basis of gender discrimination. The issue here was about just the physiological things that make a woman and a man a man. The biggest ones that came up were menstruation. And the idea here was that blood is supposed to be impure. And so if a woman is menstruating and she consecrates the sacrament, that somehow it corrupts the sacrament. And so this was a grave concern. The other issue was the issue of pregnancy, raising children. How much can a woman pay attention and give of herself to ministry if she's raising children and doing those things which are traditionally assigned to women? Now, the issue of financial burden, it was a small, only 2% of the study said this was an issue. And the argument here was this. When, within the Accra Diocese, when a person is accepted for ordination track, the diocese takes over the cost of taking that person through seminary. And so the concern this person had was that if the floodgate is open for women, that there will be so many women rushing in to become priests, that there will be this huge burden on the diocese. That has not proven to be true. Indeed, people are still trickling in, men and women alike. So this was what the concern over here was. The final concern, which 40% of the study said, was that Synod was not sure that the laity would accept women as clergy. Now, the thing you've got to remember is that Synod is made up of all clergy and representatives of the lay. Now, these representatives of the lay are speaking the voice or the thoughts of the people within their parishes and congregations. So yes, it may be one person sitting in Synod, but that person is bringing with them the thoughts and ideas of everybody who sits in their parish or their congregation. So the concern was the laity, because that's who the clergy serve. The laity must be comfortable with their priest. And one of the big things that kept coming up was the issue of covering of hair. And, you know, do you wear a beretta? Do you wear a hat? Do you wear a scarf? And when you come before the altar, so men typically, when they genuflect before the altar, would take off their beretta. But when a woman does that, then it's somehow disrespectful to God because she's exposing herself. You know, so it was sort of back and forth about how the laity was going to handle what it would look like to have a woman priest at the altar. So ultimately, with all these things, we've still ordained women. And so the question is, what shifted in the minds of people and in the minds of the diocese to bring us to this point? The first thing was just the resilience of Akrofi. When I spoke with him, he said, you know, there were times when he wept because of how cruel people were about this issue of the decision he had made. But he said he was resolute in his decision, and he made up his mind that he would push this thing forward and make sure that it happened because he believed in his heart that it was right. There was also a lot of people, there were people who supported him, and there was theological pushback from people like Bishop Toto and Bishop Nikwe. Now, Bishop Toto is obviously the bishop of the diocese today, and he said that his response was from Galatians chapter 3, verse 28, which says that in Christ there's neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female. And so his argument was that if in Christ there's no male and there's no female, then on what basis should a woman be precluded from becoming a priest? Now, Bishop Nikwe, who is the current suffragan bishop of the Anglican Diocese of Accra, and this is actually a picture of him being walked to the altar by Bishop Toto to be made the suffragan bishop. And what he said was that when Paul was creating the household churches, there were churches in which there were women who were leading those churches. And he described the leaders of those churches as fellow workers. So if they are fellow workers to Paul, then whether male or female, they are doing the same things that Paul was doing. So again, what is the basis for saying that a fellow worker cannot be ordained? Then there was a shift in thought. Generally, when you look around the world, the ordination of women is no longer a new thing. I mean, within the Methodist Church and the Presbyterian Church, this is old news. Nobody's talking about this anymore. But apart from that, other churches were pushing forward. Now, in addition to that, the world at large has moved into a space where women are in roles that were typically dominated by men. So we have more women CEOs, we have more women doctors, more women engineers. And so it became clear that the church, given that it is serving parishioners who have women who are lawyers, doctors, high-powered professionals who would normally be in male roles, clearly these are people who would understand what it is to have a priest who is a woman. One participant said that society is dynamic and humanity is evolving and the change has come to stay. Another said that as long as you allow the Holy Spirit to work through you, whether male or female, it makes no difference. And so all of these things, all these ideas were thrown out, scrunched up. Did you like that? Let me repeat that. I thought that was very cool. So all these things were thrown out and scrunched up. And ultimately, in 2011, the first women were ordained. And what Akrofi did was he went back in 2008, after all those years from 2003, he went back in 2008 and presented his case again. And this time it was approved that women could be ordained. And 3 years later, in 2011, the first 3 women were ordained: Stella Bentiencho, Susanna Akun, and Alberta Kines Adu. And this is the actual picture of them being ordained at the cathedral. So what has been the experience of these women? And again, that has been categorized based on the research that I've done so far. So one is personal biases. There was an incident where so within the internal province of Ghana, not every bishop is ordaining women. And there are people who refuse to eat communion from the hands of a woman. There are people who refuse to sit at the feet of a woman on the basis that God does not speak to women the same way he does to men. So there was actually an incident where a bishop walked into a parish, saw a woman celebrating the Mass, and he left on the basis that he did not want to participate. So personal biases was one of the things that some of the women stated as a concern, something that they had experienced in their journey to priesthood and in their time in priesthood. A second one is the need for deliberate mentorship. So when women are posted within the diocese, these women were expressing the idea that it would be good if the bishops would pay attention to where they are posting them and post them to parishes and to clergy who are sympathetic to the ordination of women. Because not all of them are. One participant said to me that still within his mind, only about 40 to 50% of the clergy are in agreement with the idea of female ordination, except they are under canonical obedience, and so they don't complain about it, but they don't actually agree with it. And because they don't agree with it, there's a tendency to not train a woman as well as she could be trained and to not guide as well. And so this particular participant said that, look, I've been lucky. I've worked with 4 of the 5 archdeacons, and they've mentored me well, but it shouldn't be based on luck. The ability of a woman to be trained properly and to perform well should be based on a deliberate effort to place her in a place where she can function. The other issue that came up was sexual and romantic relationships, where there's a sense that for some clergy and for some, even some laity, they are unable to see women as an authority figure or as a colleague. And so they approach them. Now, if they were unmarried or they were looking for a serious relationship, this would be a different conversation. But many of them are married men who approach them simply because they're there and they feel as though working in such close proximity with them, they are unable to view them simply as colleagues. This issue of educational background was an interesting one. Only one of the women spoke about this, but it is interesting to note that when Akrofi took over as bishop, most of his clergy did not have tertiary education. And yet now, when women come in who don't have tertiary education, and there's only one who we've had that situation with, there's a concern that, oh, will she be able to perform? Will she be able to get the work done? But those questions are not asked of a man. The women who have come into the priesthood so far are women who had all come from high-powered roles, who were educated in other fields. So lawyers, engineers have come into the priesthood. So we haven't had much of a challenge with women coming in directly out of high school wanting to go into seminary. And so the experience here, the concern here was that when a woman comes out of high school and says, I want to go into the priesthood, there's a concern, oh, can she perform? When a man comes out of high school and says, I want to go into the priesthood, then he's just sent to seminary to go and get a degree, and it's fine. So that was the concern there. The other concern was extra rigorous rules for female clergy. So again, for those of you who are Anglicans or who have been involved in the performance of Anglican liturgy, it can be very complicated, and there are lots of things to try and remember, things you have to sing, things you have to do with your hands, and so on. So there are mistakes that happen. And the argument here was that when men make mistakes, it's okay, because nobody's born celebrating the Mass, and it's okay for men to make mistakes. But when women make mistakes, then it becomes a big deal. The other issue is how women dress. So again, the issue of the hat, the issue of high heels. There were a number of things, high heels, women wear high heels to work. And if you're a priest and you're going to work, then you should be able to wear your high heels. But then that has often come up as, why are you wearing high heels? You are tempting us. So there are all these things that come up that don't seem to align. So it seems as though there are extra rigorous rules when it comes to female clergy. The final issue is the issue of title. So when a person is ordained a deacon, they become Reverend XYZ. When they are a man and they are ordained a priest, they become Reverend Father XYZ. When a woman is ordained a priest, she remains as Reverend. Now, some have tried to use Reverend Mother, which of course is a nun, and so that doesn't work well. Some have tried to use Reverend Father, which they say, oh, well, but a father is male, so you can't be a Reverend Father if you're a woman. So what ultimately has happened is that it remains as a Reverend. So there's always a sense of, even when you're a woman and you're ordained a priest, you still stay title-wise at the level of a deacon. And so that was a challenge that came up. And it was mentioned not just by the participants, but also by other male clergy, that it was an area of grayness and confusion. So in conclusion, we've had some successes. We have 12 ordained women. Akrofi ordained 4, Stella, Susanna, Alberta, and in 2012 he ordained Mary. And then when he retired and Toto became bishop, he has since ordained 8 women: Mariam, Emma, myself, Sylvia, Irene, Regina, Vivian, and Gloria. Now, we've also had further successes in that, so with us, a canon, to be made a canon is to be considered a senior priest who has done exceptionally well. And we had our first canon, female canon, was made last year. And this is Reverend Canon Alberta Kenis-Addo, who was actually the third woman to have been ordained. So she was ordained by Akrofi, and she was canonized by Toto, based on exceptional performance. So there was a concern that, people perform well, but then nobody acknowledges it. And so for Toto to have made this move and made her canon was truly outstanding. So she is actually the first female to be canonized, not just within the Anglican Diocese of Accra, but within the internal province of Ghana. Additionally, there are women clergy who are now in senior leadership. We now have our first director of the Diocesan Ministerial Training School, Reverend Mariam, and myself as the director of programs. Other successes, there are more women in seminary, so other women have been approved. So clearly, the continuation of the ordination of women is something that is going to happen. It is not ending, and the women who have come in are actually much younger, which makes it even more important to address some of the issues that have been raised by this study so far. So what are our growth opportunities? They are not weaknesses, they are growth opportunities. So we have the opportunity to be more conscientious about female postings, so that women should be posted where they will thrive, as opposed to where they will just try to survive. Secondly, there should be deliberate mentorship for female clergy, so that above and beyond just being posted, there should be a deliberate effort by the diocese to ensure that there's pairing and partnerships so that the women can actually do well and can learn from clergy who have been truly successful. We need to implement and institute policies around pregnancy, around childbearing. To date, no woman has been pregnant, primarily because all the women who have been ordained are have either finished having their children or have clearly indicated that they have no intention of having children. And so we've dodged that bullet by just avoiding it. But then as we have younger women who are entering into seminary, it is going to happen. I think the youngest woman coming in is 21. So in the next 5 to 10 years' time, she is going to have a child, God willing. And there needs to be a policy around it. And it shouldn't be a policy that we develop when she's 7 months pregnant. It should be a policy that we develop now. Sexual harassment training for both male and female clergy. So again, this is a very corporate sort of thing. I mean, people generally need to be trained on sexual harassment. But it goes both ways because one, yes, men need to be trained on what it is what constitutes sexual harassment and what doesn't. But so do women, because there are many things that happen that are not sexual harassment, that are perceived as sexual harassment because of a misunderstanding of what sexual harassment is. So there should be training for both. And then clarity on female attire and title. It just needs to be written down somewhere. I guess a committee should be formed who sit and decide on what constitutes proper female attire and the proper female title. Because nature abhors a vacuum, and in the presence of a vacuum, everybody just fills it with whatever sounds good to them. So overall, there has been clearly an outstanding effort by the leadership of the Anglican Diocese of Accra to ordain women. But there is room for improvement. There's a need to establish women properly as clergy and to put in intentional provisions to meet the needs of women clergy. And so thank you. I'll take questions.
Thank you. I'm going to move this and both of them.
All right, got it.
Thank you very much, Ekwa. I was having flashbacks as you talked about the history of the journey towards women's ordination in this country, in 1970s. I remember a friend who, it was her hair. It was the problem. How could she administer the chalice and the host with long hair? We didn't have the heels so much, but we sure had hair, we had clothes, we had all kinds of resistance, and it broke down in terms of high church people. The theological arguments were that Jesus had called only 12 men as to be the 12, and none of them was a woman. So apostolic succession kind of questions. In more Protestant-oriented churches, it was the biblical texts that were the ones attributed to Paul and the ones that are actually in Pauline letters that were, and then the sort of a failure to recognize some of the really important women role models of leadership in the Bible, in both testaments. Same old. So I think there's a lot of recognition here. I would be willing to bet that there are questions all over the place. As we give people a chance to do that, let me ask you then, so